The first tool we're going to learn how to use is the spinner that I prepared. You can find it under your prefabs folder in the assets I provided. For now, just simply click and drag it into your scene to be able to add a spinner into your game. And if you press run, we'll see what it is that it does right outside of the box. Well, out of the box, it just starts to spin in a counterclockwise direction and is able to hit my player. Maybe I'll shove this a little bit more forward so I don't get hit right off the bat. One thing that's important for us to remember is that whatever I apply to a prefab will apply to all the child objects below it. So if I double click on my spinner, I can actually view this prefab object in the editor, and if I wanted to, I could actually apply a custom material to it. For example, what if I wanted to make all my obstacles have this red hue to them? Once I apply this and I head back out of my prefab, you'll see that the object in my world also has this red color. And now, all the different prefabs of this spinner that I place in the world will have a similar color. I can also change this color after the fact to my prefab and everything will change. Let me show you really quick here. If I go into my materials, I decided to make this pink and I head back over here. Now everything is pink. I can also apply materials to individual spinners just in the normal editor and override that information so that each of them has a different color. Up to you how you want to color things, but let's just have both of mine be red right now just so they look a little bit intimidating and dangerous. The next thing for us to notice here is that I have a singular direction that this is rotating at the current moment. I've pre-built some settings into these tools for you to play around with. The main one being the axis of rotation as well as the rotation speed. A negative rotation speed takes us counterclockwise. If I change this to be positive 2, I should see that this particular spinner now goes the opposite direction, clockwise instead of counterclockwise. I haven't coded these spinners to interact with each other. That's something you could change if you wanted to, but I don't mind them going through each other. That works just fine for my game prototype right now. I can also change the axis of rotation if I want to, and if I want to play around with this, I can actually change it and toggle it while the game is running to kind of see what the effect is. And here, because I've enabled both of them at different times, I have this strange axis of rotation. So what I can do is just press reset, maybe only choose Z, and now run it again. And now I have the spinner that kind of cuts through my world. Or maybe I want it to be kind of on a weird lopsided angle, and so I can kind of play around with that to get it in the setup that I want it to go. Just remember that anything you change while the game is running won't be memorized. It's going to revert back to its initial state after you press stop. Right now, I'm happy with this one and this one going in those directions, so I'm going to create a third one, copy and paste, and I'm going to have this one instead go on the Z-axis so that I have one that's going through the world and up and around like that. I think that's cool. Oh wait, I forgot to change this one back. I actually want this one to still be on the Y so that I have those two different directions to kind of watch out for this kind of pincer action here. Great. And now I'm just going to test out what happens if I kind of go in between them. Oh, I kind of get bumped. And I notice that these ones, depending on the angle they hit me, sometimes don't fly me off the screen. I like that it's kind of forgiving. Maybe I want to make the force of impact a little bit greater some other time to make that a little bit more challenging if I get hit. That one seems to smack me in a nice way. So wonderful. I have these spinners working just fine. However, what if I wanted to, for example, take this third spinner, and for some gameplay reason, I didn't want it to be spinning kind of on the edge of the world, but I wanted the center to be spinning around so that it kind of looks like a bit like a windmill effect. Maybe even raise it in the sky a little bit with some other graphics. Well, I can actually change the center of rotation by taking a look at the spinner in the hierarchy. The actual parent of this spinner object is actually an empty game object just with a script on it. The actual visual spinner itself is a child object buried underneath that includes the rigid body, the collider, and all the rendering that's going on with it. And the way that this works in Unity is the position of the child object is a relative position to the objective or world position of the parent spinner. All fancy terms kind of all together saying that if I change the position of the child, it doesn't change the position of the parent, but it does change the way the child and the parent interact. Let me show you what I mean. Right now, we know that this corner is the axis which the entire system is spinning around. I can prove this by heading back into my running game and seeing that it's spinning right around that little point, that axis of rotation. Meaning that if I move this parent object over, the axis of rotation is now this point right here. But what if I took the child and moved it back so that the visual is now in that initial state? Because the parent had its center point or the rotation point here, moving the child doesn't change that point of rotation. It just moves the relative object in relation to that point. Now when I press play, the object will now rotate around that point defined by the parent. And if I wanted to move it up, I need to make sure to move the parent so that that point of rotation is higher up off the ground. And now when I press run, I should see that this rotates kind of like a windmill around that center point. Knowing this, I can change the point of rotation anywhere that I want to for this object. Do be careful about putting it in weird spots far away from the parent, because you can get some weird, but maybe it's kind of the rotation that you want effects happening. Do remember that if you really mess it up and don't know how to fix it, just delete it and reapply a new prefab to your scene to mess with it from scratch again. So let's give this one quick play test. I like the way that it looks right now for just a little prototype experiment, and I have this little kind of windmill effect to try to get through, and there we go. I've made it to the end of my level with these spinners in place. Feel free to add these into your own scene and play around with getting them set up till you're comfortable with the way that they work so that you can implement them in your own game confidently later.